The dust-laden wind stung Amanda Vance's face as she collapsed to her knees on the barren trail. Her once pristine blue dress now tattered and stained with the red earth of Arizona Territory. It was 1878, and the unforgiving summer sun showed no mercy to those who dared traverse the rugged landscape, unprepared especially not to a city woman fleeing the remains of her shattered life. "I can't keep going," she whispered, her parched lips cracking as tears cut clean trails through the dust on her cheeks. The tall figure who had been riding slightly ahead turned his horse around, the animal's hooves kicking up small clouds of dust. His face was partially hidden beneath the wide brim of his well-worn hat, but his eyes clear and piercing blue found hers with unexpected gentleness. Daniel Hayes dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling softly as his boots hit the ground. He crouched beside her, his calloused hand reaching out to support her elbow. "Then lean till you can," he whispered, his voice low and steady like the distant roll of thunder before a storm. Amanda had met the cowboy just 2 days prior when he'd found her half delirious at a stagecoach stop after bandits had attacked, killing the driver and the other passengers. She'd only survived by hiding beneath the overturned coach while the outlaws took everything of value. Daniel had been tracking the same gang for months. They'd killed his younger brother during a bank robbery in Tucson. Their destination was Promise Creek, a small but growing settlement where Amanda's distant cousin lived. It was her only remaining hope after her husband's gambling debts had cost them everything in Philadelphia, his suicide leaving her alone to face the creditors and shame. "We're still 6 hours from Promise Creek," Daniel said, gently helping her to her feet. "But there's a creek about a mile ahead. We can rest there until evening when it's cooler." Amanda nodded weakly, too exhausted to speak. Daniel guided her to his horse, a sturdy Palomino named Chance. "I'll walk," he said, helping her into the saddle. "You just focus on staying upright." The mile to the creek stretched like an eternity. Amanda swayed in the saddle, gripping the horn with whitened knuckles. Every step Chance took sent pain shooting through her blistered feet and sunburned shoulders. Philadelphia society hadn't prepared her for this brutal land. When they finally reached the small stream sheltered by cottonwood trees, Amanda nearly wept with relief. Daniel helped her dismount, his strong hands steady and sure around her waist. The momentary closeness made her breath catch a sensation she quickly attributed to exhaustion. "Rest here," he instructed, guiding her to a shady spot beneath the largest cottonwood. "I'll get water." Amanda watched through half-closed eyes as he filled their canteens from the clear running stream. There was an efficient grace to his movements, a man completely at home in this harsh wilderness that had nearly broken her in just 2 days. "Here," he said, returning to press a cool, damp bandana against her forehead. "Small sips of water. Too much too fast will make you sick." His kindness nearly undid her. In Philadelphia, men had shown her courtesy out of social obligation. Daniel's care came from somewhere deeper, more genuine. "Thank you," she managed, accepting the canteen. "I'm sorry to slow you down." His expression softened slightly. "Those bandits have a 3-day head start already. A few more hours won't matter." "Is that truly why you're tracking them? For your brother?" Daniel's jaw tightened as he looked away. "Tommy was 22, never hurt anyone in his life. He was just in the bank, depositing his first cattle sale earnings." He paused. "The law in these parts is stretched thin. Sometimes justice needs a helping hand." Amanda studied his profile, the straight nose, the strong jaw darkened with several days' stubble, the small scar just below his right cheekbone. He couldn't be much older than 30, yet his eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen far more than his years should allow. "And what about you?" he asked, turning the conversation. Philadelphia is a long way from Arizona territory. Amanda's fingers found the plain gold band she still wore. My husband, Robert, was a businessman, or so everyone thought. Turns out he was better at spending money than making it. When the debts came due, She swallowed hard. He took the coward's way out, left me to face everyone. Daniel didn't offer empty sympathy, and she was grateful. Instead, he simply nodded and said, "People can surprise you good and bad." They rested through the hottest part of the day. Daniel caught fish from the creek and cooked them over a small fire. The simple meal was better than any fancy dinner Amanda had eaten in Philadelphia. As evening approached, bringing merciful coolness, Daniel said, "We should reach Promise Creek by midnight if we ride double. Your cousin expecting you. Martha knows I'm coming, but not when. The stage wasn't due for another 3 days." He nodded. Martha Miller, at the boarding house. Amanda's surprise must have shown on her face because he gave her a rare half-smile. "It's a small settlement. Everyone knows everyone." "Yes, that's her. We corresponded after Robert's death. She offered me a place to stay until I can figure things out." The enormity of her uncertain future threatened to overwhelm her again. Daniel must have sensed her distress because he said, "One day at a time, Miss Amanda. That's how we survive out here." "Mrs.," she corrected automatically, then paused. "Though I suppose that hardly matters now." As dusk settled around them, Daniel helped her onto Chance, then mounted behind her. The intimacy of their positions, his chest warm against her back, his arms around her to hold the reins, sent a flush through Amanda that had nothing to do with the lingering heat of the day. They rode in silence through the gathering darkness, the rhythm of the horse's gait and Daniel's steady presence eventually lulling Amanda into an exhausted doze. She woke intermittently, always to find herself securely held in his arms, his vigilant eyes scanning the dark landscape. It was well past midnight when the scattered lights of Promise Creek appeared in the distance. The small town was mostly dark except for the saloon and a few other establishments that catered to cowboys and travelers. "Martha's place is on the north end," Daniel said, his voice close to her ear. "The big white house with the picket fence." As they approached, a light appeared in one of the downstairs windows. By the time Daniel helped Amanda dismount in front of the neat gate, the front door had opened to reveal a stout woman in a hastily donned wrapper, holding a lamp aloft. "Who's there?" she called, her voice firm despite the late hour. "Martha, it's Amanda," she replied weakly. "Amanda Vance." "Good heavens!" The woman hurried down the path. "You weren't due for days. And who's this with you?" "Daniel Hayes, madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat respectfully. The stage was attacked. Mrs. Vance was the only survivor. I found her at the station and brought her the rest of the way. Martha's expression shifted from confusion to horror. "My poor dear, come inside at once, both of you." Amanda turned to Daniel, suddenly reluctant to part from the man who had become her lifeline. "Will you come in?" He shook his head. "Need to stable Chance and find a room at the hotel, but I'll check on you tomorrow if that's all right." "Of course," she said, unable to hide her disappointment. He hesitated, then reached out to lightly touch her shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, Mrs. Vance. You made it this far." With that, he mounted his horse and rode toward the livery, the darkness quickly swallowing his silhouette. Amanda watched until she could no longer see him, an unexpected hollow feeling spreading in her chest. "Come inside, child," Martha said gently. "You look dead on your feet." Amanda allowed herself to be led into the house, her body moving mechanically while her mind remained on the cowboy who had saved her life, and then disappeared into the night like a dream. The next morning, Amanda woke in a clean, simple room, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, illuminating a washstand with a pitcher and bowl, a small dresser, and the narrow but comfortable bed where she lay. The events of the past days rushed back, bringing with them an ache in every muscle. A soft knock preceded Martha's entrance, bearing a tray with coffee, toast, and eggs. "Good morning, my dear. I thought you might prefer breakfast in bed today." Amanda sat up gingerly. "That's very kind, thank you." Martha set the tray across Amanda's lap. "Mr. Hayes came by earlier. Said to tell you he'll return this afternoon. He seemed quite concerned." Amanda felt a ridiculous flush of pleasure. "He saved my life." Martha's shrewd eyes studied her. "He mentioned something about tracking bandits, dangerous business." "They killed his brother," Amanda explained, sipping the strong coffee gratefully. "And everyone on my stage." Martha clicked her tongue sympathetically. "This territory can be merciless, but Promise Creek is growing more civilized by the day. We've got a proper church now, and the school has 15 children. Sheriff Donovan keeps reasonable order." "It sounds lovely," Amanda said politely, though the settlement had appeared impossibly tiny and rough compared to Philadelphia. "It's no eastern city," Martha acknowledged with a knowing smile, "but it's home. And now it's yours too, at least for a while. Rest today. Tomorrow we'll talk about how you might help around the boarding house to earn your keep." After Martha left, Amanda finished her breakfast, then managed to wash using the water in the pitcher. Her few remaining possessions had been in her carpet bag, which Daniel had retrieved from the stagecoach wreckage. The simple calico dress she changed into was a far cry from the fashionable ensembles she'd worn in Philadelphia, but it was clean and practical. By mid-afternoon, she felt strong enough to venture downstairs. Martha's boarding house was neat and comfortable, with a parlor for guests, a dining room where meals were served family style, and a kitchen that smelled of fresh bread. Amanda found her cousin kneading dough, her capable hands working with practiced efficiency. "Feel better?" Martha asked, looking up with a smile. "Much, thank you. Can I help with anything?" Martha nodded toward a basket of green beans. "Those need stringing for supper. 6 boarders at present plus us, men working on the new railroad spur." Amanda sat at the kitchen table and began preparing the beans, finding unexpected comfort in the simple task. Outside the window, she could see Promise Creek's main street, a dusty thoroughfare lined with a general store, saloon, small hotel, livery, and a handful of other businesses. People moved about their afternoon errands, nodding to neighbors, stopping to chat. "It's different from what you're used to," Martha observed, "but good people mostly, hard-working." "It's peaceful," Amanda said, surprising herself with the sincerity in her voice. After the chaos and shame of her final months in Philadelphia, the simplicity of Promise Creek held definite appeal. They worked in companionable silence until the back door rattled with a knock. Martha wiped her hands on her apron and answered it, revealing Daniel Hayes standing on the porch, hat in hand. The sight of him clean-shaven now, wearing a fresh shirt under his worn leather vest, made Amanda's heart beat a little faster. "Afternoon, Mrs. Miller," he said respectfully. "Come to see how Mrs. Vance is faring." "Much better for a night's rest," Martha replied warmly. "Come in, Mr. Hayes. Coffee?" "Much obliged." He stepped into the kitchen, his tall frame making the room seem smaller. His eyes found Amanda, a flash of relief crossing his features when he saw her up and about. "You look better," he said simply. "Amazing what sleep and not being on the verge of death will do," she replied with a small smile. Martha poured coffee for Daniel and discreetly disappeared into the dining room, leaving them alone. "Have you spoken to the sheriff?" Amanda asked, returning to her bean stringing to hide her inexplicable nervousness. Daniel nodded, taking a seat at the table. Gave him a description of the bandits. They've hit 2 other stages in the past month. He's got men out looking, but... He shrugged, the gesture conveying his doubt about the local law's effectiveness. And will you continue tracking them? His fingers tightened around the coffee cup. Yes. I've got a lead they might be headed toward Silver Gulch, planning to ride out tomorrow. Amanda's heart sank. Oh, so soon. His eyes met hers. Justice doesn't wait, Mrs. Vance. Amanda, she corrected softly. After what we've been through, I think formality is unnecessary. A slight smile touched his lips. Amanda, then. The way he said her name with that slight drawl sent a pleasant shiver through her. Will you come back to Promise Creek afterward? If the trail leads back this way, he said noncommittally. Disappointment settled in her chest. Of course he wouldn't return just for her. They were strangers who had shared a dangerous journey, nothing more. Yet something in his steady gaze suggested he wasn't entirely indifferent to her. I never properly thanked you, she said, for saving my life. Daniel set down his cup. No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same. No, she said firmly. Not anyone. You could have left me at the station for the next stage. You risked your life to bring me here safely. He looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. Well, couldn't leave a lady in distress. My mother would haunt me if I had. A comfortable silence fell between them. Amanda noticed the way the afternoon light caught the gold flecks in his blue eyes, the tiny lines at their corners that spoke of squinting against the harsh western sun. Tell me about yourself, Daniel Hayes, she said impulsively. Where is home for you? He considered the question. Got a small ranch about 60 miles northwest of here. Nothing fancy. 100 head of cattle, good water rights. Been building it up for about 5 years now. Alone. Just me and a couple of hands during calving season. He paused. Tommy would stay sometimes, helping out between his own jobs. The mention of his brother brought a shadow across his features. I'm sorry, Amanda said softly. About your brother. Daniel nodded once, accepting her sympathy without comment. What about you? Any family back east? No, she admitted. My parents died when I was young. I was raised by an aunt who passed 3 years ago after Robert died. She twisted her wedding band absently. There was nothing left for me there. Daniel's gaze fell to the ring. Hard to start over, but not impossible. Before Amanda could respond, Martha returned with a plate of cookies. Fresh baked this morning, she announced. Mr. Hayes, you're welcome to stay for supper. The boarders always appreciate a new face at the table. That's kind, madam, but I've got preparations to make for tomorrow. He stood, placing his hat back on his head. Thank you for the coffee. Martha nodded understandingly. Well, our door is always open when you're passing through. Daniel turned to Amanda. Walk me out. Heart fluttering, she followed him onto the back porch. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Martha's vegetable garden. In the distance, mountains rose purple against the deepening blue sky. Beautiful, isn't it? Daniel said, following her gaze. Different kind of beauty than back east, I expect. Harsher, Amanda agreed, but yes, beautiful in its own way. He turned to face her. I meant what I said before, you're stronger than you think. I don't feel strong, she admitted. I feel lost. That'll pass, just give yourself time. He hesitated, then added, Martha's a good woman, you're fortunate to have her. Yes. Amanda searched for words to prolong their goodbye. Daniel, please be careful. These men have already killed so many. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise at her concern, perhaps. I've been tracking outlaws since the war ended. I know what I'm doing. Still, she pressed, boldly placing her hand on his arm. I would hate to hear you'd been hurt. He looked down at her hand, then covered it briefly with his own. I'll be careful, and Amanda. Yes. When you feel like you can't go on, find something or someone to lean on till you can. That's how we all get by out here. With that, He tipped his hat and descended the porch steps. Amanda watched him walk toward the livery where Chance was stabled, his tall figure straight and purposeful. She remained on the porch long after he disappeared from view, wondering why the departure of a man she barely knew left such an ache in her heart. The following weeks passed in a blur of new routines for Amanda. Martha proved to be not only a kind hostess, but an excellent teacher, patiently showing her cousin the workings of the boarding house, how to manage the accounts, which suppliers provided the best goods, and how to deal with the various personalities of their boarders. Amanda took to the work more readily than she'd expected. The practical tasks kept her hands busy and her mind focused, preventing her from dwelling on the past. Martha's boarders, mostly railroad workers with a few traveling salesmen mixed in, were respectful and appreciative of the clean rooms and hearty meals provided. Promise Creek itself began to feel less foreign as Amanda became acquainted with its residents. There was Dr. Wilson and his young wife who ran the small clinic, Mr. Peterson who owned the general store and extended credit to families going through hard times, Sheriff Donovan, gruff but fair, and numerous others who made up the fabric of the growing community. The women of the town, initially curious about the Eastern widow, soon welcomed her into their circle. Amanda found herself invited to quilting bays and church socials, her Philadelphia manners lending her a certain cachet among the frontier women eager for news of Eastern fashions and customs. Yet despite her growing comfort in Promise Creek, Amanda found her thoughts often turning to Daniel Hayes. Each day, she scanned the street for his familiar figure, and each night, she said a silent prayer for his safety. 3 weeks after his departure, she finally heard news of him. Hayes shot one of them Larson gang boys down near Silver Gulch, announced Mr. Riley, one of the railroad workers at the breakfast table. Sheriff just got word yesterday. Amanda nearly dropped the coffee pot she was carrying. Is Mr. Hayes all right? Far as anyone knows, Riley replied, accepting a refill. Story goes he tracked him to a saloon and confronted him. One drew on him, got himself killed for the trouble. Others escaped. Those Larson boys have been terrorizing stage coaches from here to Tucson, added Mr. Fleming, another boarder. About time someone stood up to them. Martha cast a concerned glance at Amanda, whose face had gone pale. That's quite enough excitement for the breakfast table, gentlemen. Mr. Fleming, will you be wanting more flapjacks? Later, in the kitchen, Martha found Amanda staring absently out the window. He's a capable man, Amanda. This isn't his first brush with danger. I know, Amanda sighed. It's foolish to worry about someone who's practically a stranger. Martha's shrewd eyes studied her. Is he a stranger? Amanda flushed. We spent barely 2 days together. That hardly constitutes an acquaintance, let alone a friendship. Some connections don't need time, Martha said wisely. My Henry and I knew after one church social that we were meant for each other. Married 3 weeks later and had 30 good years together. It's not like that, Amanda protested, though her racing heart suggested otherwise. Mr. Hayes was simply kind to a woman in distress, nothing more. If you say so, dear, Martha replied, unconvinced. Now we need to inventory the preserves for winter. Summer will be gone before we know it. The days continued to pass. August brought fierce thunderstorms that briefly transformed the arid landscape into a riot of wildflowers and rushing streams. Amanda found unexpected joy in these desert blooms, so different from Philadelphia's manicured gardens, yet somehow more vibrant and resilient. It was during one such storm, nearly 6 weeks after Daniel's departure, that Amanda heard the front door bang open while she was tallying the week's expenses in the parlor. Assuming it was one of the boarders seeking shelter from the downpour, She looked up with a welcoming smile that froze when she saw who stood dripping on Martha's polished floor. Daniel Hayes removed his soaked hat, water streaming from his duster. His face was leaner than she remembered, with a new scar along his jawline and dark circles under his eyes. But when he saw her, a warm smile transformed his weary features. "Amanda," he said simply. She rose so quickly her chair nearly toppled. "Daniel, you're back." Martha appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Hayes, goodness, you're soaked through. Amanda, fetch a towel. Mr. Hayes, come sit by the fire before you catch your death." Amanda hurried to comply, her heart hammering. When she returned with towels, Daniel had removed his duster and was standing by the hearth, steam rising from his damp clothes. She handed him a towel, their fingers brushing momentarily. "Thank you," he said, his eyes never leaving hers as he dried his face and hair. "I'll make some coffee," Martha announced, giving Amanda a knowing look before disappearing back into the kitchen. "We heard about Silver Gulch," Amanda said once they were alone. "That you shot one of the bandits." Daniel's expression hardened slightly. "Didn't have much choice. He drew first. The others, still tracking them, but I got a name, Mason Larson. He's the leader." Daniel ran a hand through his damp hair. "Trail led me back this way, thought I'd stop and—" He hesitated. "And," Amanda prompted, holding her breath. "See how you were settling in," he finished, though something in his eyes suggested there might have been more to it. "I'm well," she said. "Martha has been wonderful. The town has been welcoming." "Good," he nodded. "That's good." An awkward silence fell between them. Amanda wanted to tell him how often she'd thought of him, how his words of encouragement had helped her through difficult moments of adjustment. But such admissions seemed too forward, too revealing. "And your ranch?" she asked instead. "Have you been back?" briefly. "My foreman's handling things." He cleared his throat. "Actually, I've got business with Sheriff Donovan. He's forming a posse. The Larson gang was spotted near Copper Canyon, about a day's ride from here." Amanda's stomach clenched with fear. "You're joining the posse. I know these men better than anyone now." 4 of them left, including Mason. His jaw tightened. "They've killed a dozen people that we know of. Won't stop until they're caught or dead." Martha returned with coffee and a plate of biscuits. "You look like you could use a proper meal, Mr. Hayes. Will you stay for supper?" "Thank you, madam, but I need to meet with the sheriff." He accepted the coffee gratefully. "Though I wouldn't say no to a room for tonight if you've got one available." "Always room for you here," Martha assured him. "Amanda, why don't you show Mr. Hayes to the blue room while I finish supper preparations?" Amanda led Daniel upstairs to a small but comfortable bedroom at the end of the hall, away from the regular boarders. "Bathrooms at the end of the hall. Supper's at 6. Daniel set his saddlebags on the bed. "This is fine, thank you." She hesitated in the doorway. "When do you leave with the posse? First light tomorrow?" He met her gaze directly. "Shouldn't be gone more than a week." Amanda nodded, trying to hide her concern. "Well, you know where to find us when you return." "Amanda," he called as she turned to leave. When she looked back, he seemed to be struggling with words. "It's good to see you looking well. Real good." His sincerity warmed her. "It's good to see you too, Daniel. Though I wish it were under less dangerous circumstances." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Danger's part of life out here, but so is coming home safe afterward." The word home lingered between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. "I'll see you at supper," she said softly, and closed the door behind her. That evening, Daniel joined the boarding house residents for the meal. Amanda observed how easily he conversed with the railroad men, discussing the progress of the spur line and the changes it would bring to Promise Creek. He was quieter around the traveling salesmen, listening more than speaking. his eyes occasionally finding hers across the table. After the meal, while the other boarders retired to the parlor for cards, Daniel helped Amanda clear the dishes, an action that raised eyebrows among the men but earned an approving nod from Martha. "You don't have to help," Amanda said as they worked side by side in the kitchen. "My mother raised me better than to sit while ladies work," he replied, rolling up his sleeves to plunge his hands into the dishwater. "Besides, gave me an excuse to talk to you alone." Her pulse quickened. "Oh," he handed her a clean plate to dry. "Been thinking about you, out on the trail. Wondering how you were managing." "Have you?" She couldn't keep the pleased note from her voice. "It's not an easy adjustment, city to frontier." His eyes studied her face. "But you look like you belong here now, less haunted." Amanda considered this. "I do feel different, stronger perhaps. More useful. Philadelphia seems far away, farther every day." She set down the dried plate. "I still wear his ring, but I barely think of Robert anymore." "Is that terrible?" Daniel shook his head. "Sounds like healing to me." They finished the dishes in companionable silence. As Amanda put away the last cup, Daniel leaned against the counter, watching her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "Amanda, when this business with the Larson gang is finished." He began, then stopped, seeming uncertain how to continue. "Yes," she encouraged, her heart in her throat. The back door burst open before he could respond, admitting Sheriff Donovan, his expression grim. "Hayes," he barked, barely acknowledging Amanda. "Just got word. Larson's hit the Thompson ranch, killed the old man, took his horses. They're headed for Rattlesnake Pass." Daniel's demeanor changed instantly, the gentle man who'd been helping with dishes transforming into a hard-eyed hunter. "When?" "This afternoon. They've got maybe 5 hours on us. I'm gathering men now. We ride in 30 minutes. "I'll get my gear," Daniel said, already moving toward the stairs. The sheriff nodded curtly at Amanda before departing. She stood frozen, the dish towel clutched in her hands, the moment with Daniel shattered. He returned minutes later, gun belt fastened, rifle in hand, saddlebags over his shoulder. His expression softened slightly when he saw her still standing in the kitchen. "I've got to go," he said unnecessarily. "I know." She swallowed hard. "Please be careful." He hesitated, then stepped closer, one hand coming up to gently touch her cheek. "I'll come back." Before she could respond, he was gone, the back door closing firmly behind him. Amanda stood in the silent kitchen, her cheek tingling where his fingers had touched, her heart a jumble of fear and something dangerously close to love. Martha found her there moments later. "The posse is leaving," she said gently. "Half the town's turned out to see them off. Do you want to go?" Amanda shook her head. "I've already said goodbye." Martha squeezed her hand understandingly. "Then we pray for their safe return, and we keep busy until they do." The week that followed was the longest of Amanda's life. She threw herself into her work at the boarding house, taking on extra tasks to occupy her mind. She baked more pies than the boarders could eat, scrubbed floors that were already clean, and reorganized the linen closet twice. News trickled in sporadically. The posse had tracked the outlaws into the mountains. There had been a skirmish, with injuries on both sides. 2 of the gang were captured, but Mason Larson and his brother were still at large. On the 8th day, as Amanda was hanging laundry in the backyard, she heard a commotion from the direction of Main Street. Shielding her eyes against the sun, she saw a crowd gathering, and her heart leapt with hope that the posse had returned. She abandoned the laundry and hurried toward the street. The crowd parted as she approached, revealing a grim procession. Sheriff Donovan led the way, followed by 4 riders leading horses with bodies draped over their saddles. Behind them came the remaining posse members, dusty and exhausted. Amanda scanned their faces frantically, searching for Daniel. When she didn't see him, cold dread washed over her. She pushed forward, grabbing the arm of a deputy she recognized. "Where's Daniel Hayes?" she demanded, her voice barely recognizable to her own ears. The young man looked at her with sympathy. "Doc Wilson's place. Took a bullet." Amanda didn't remember running to the doctor's small clinic. She burst through the door, startling Mrs. Wilson, who was organizing supplies at the front desk. "Daniel Hayes," Amanda gasped. "Is he alive, Mrs.?" Wilson assured her quickly. "But it was close. Bullet missed his heart by an inch. He's lost a lot of blood." "May I see him?" Mrs. Wilson hesitated. "Doctor's just finished surgery. He needs rest." "Please," Amanda begged, "just for a moment." Something in her desperate expression must have moved the doctor's wife. "5 minutes," she conceded. "He's in the back room." Daniel lay motionless on a narrow bed, his face nearly as white as the bandage wrapped around his chest. Amanda approached quietly, tears blurring her vision. His breathing was shallow but steady. She gently took his hand, alarmed by its coolness. "Daniel," she whispered, "I'm here." His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Amanda sank into the chair beside the bed, still holding his hand. "You promised to come back," she murmured, a tear slipping down her cheek. "So you'd better not leave me now." She sat with him until Mrs. Wilson returned, reluctantly relinquishing her place only when the doctor himself insisted she go home and rest. Amanda returned every day, bringing fresh flowers for the windowsill and reading to Daniel from the newspaper, though he remained unconscious. On the 4th day, as she was quietly reading a story about the railroad's progress, his fingers twitched in hers. "Daniel," she said, setting aside the paper. "Can you hear me?" His eyes opened slowly, confusion giving way to recognition as he focused on her face. "Amanda," he rasped, his voice barely audible. Relief flooded through her. "Don't try to talk, you've been badly hurt." He swallowed with difficulty. "Larson? Dead," she assured him. "Both brothers, it's over, Daniel." He closed his eyes briefly, tension visibly leaving his body. When he looked at her again, there was something vulnerable in his gaze. "You've been here. Every day." She squeezed his hand. "Someone had to make sure you kept your promise to come back." A faint smile touched his lips. "Stubborn woman." "You have no idea," she replied, returning his smile through tears. Dr. Wilson entered then, pleased to find his patient awake. He examined Daniel thoroughly while Amanda waited outside, her heart lighter than it had been in days. When the doctor emerged, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "The fever's broken and the wound's clean. If we can prevent infection, he should recover." He regarded Amanda with kind eyes. "He's asking for you." She returned to find Daniel propped slightly higher on his pillows, still deathly pale but with a spark of life back in his eyes. "Doctor says you've barely left my side," he said as she settled back into the chair. "I may have neglected some of my duties at the boarding house," she admitted. "Martha's been very understanding." Daniel's hand sought hers. "Why, Amanda?" The directness of his question took her breath away. She could have deflected, could have spoken of simple human kindness or repaying the debt she owed him. Instead, she chose honesty. "Because I couldn't bear the thought of losing you," she said softly. "Because somewhere between collapsing on that trail and today, you became important to me. More important than I realized until I thought you might die." His fingers tightened around hers. "I thought of you," he said, his voice gaining strength. "When I took that bullet, thought I might never see you again. It made me angry enough to hang on." Amanda laughed through her tears. "Then I'm glad I made you angry." His expression grew serious. "What I was trying to say before the sheriff interrupted that night. When this was over, I wanted to ask if you might consider visiting my ranch. It's nothing fancy, but it's good land. Peaceful." "Are you asking me to come home with you, Daniel Hayes?" she asked, her heart pounding. "Not exactly." He paused, gathering strength. "I'm asking if you might consider making it your home too, someday, when we know each other better." Amanda stared at him, scarcely believing what she was hearing. "That sounds suspiciously like a conditional marriage proposal." A smile tugged at his lips. "Suppose it does. Too soon. Considering I thought you were dying 3 days ago, perhaps we should take things slowly," she replied, though her heart was singing. "But I would very much like to see your ranch when you're well enough to travel." Relief and happiness spread across his features. "It's settled then." Recovery was a slow process. Daniel chafed at the confinement, but Amanda's daily visits gave him something to look forward to. She brought books and news, sometimes simply sitting quietly with him while she mended clothing or worked on boarding house accounts. They learned each other's stories during those quiet afternoons. Daniel told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about fighting for the Union in the war, about drifting west afterward and working cattle drives until he saved enough for his own land. Amanda shared memories of her parents before they died of influenza, of her strict but loving aunt who raised her, of the early happy days with Robert before gambling consumed him. By the time Daniel was strong enough to leave the doctor's care 3 weeks later, Amanda felt she knew him better than she'd ever known her husband of 5 years. It was a sobering realization, one that both frightened and exhilarated her. Martha insisted Daniel stay at the boarding house to complete his convalescence. "That hotel room is no place for a man recovering from a gunshot wound," she declared. "Besides, we've got the yellow room empty now that Mr. Peterson's brother has returned to Denver." If the arrangement raised eyebrows in Promise Creek, no one dared comment directly. Daniel was something of a hero now, having played a crucial role in eliminating the Larson gang that had terrorized the region for months. Sheriff Donovan himself visited several times, bringing news that the remaining gang members had been sentenced to hang in Tucson. "Justice for your brother," Amanda said quietly when the sheriff had left after one such visit. Daniel nodded, his expression somber. "Tommy can rest easier now. And so can the others they killed." He took her hand. "Including those folks on your stage." As September gave way to October, Daniel's strength returned. He began taking short walks with Amanda, their progress noted with interest by the townspeople. They made no secret of their growing attachment, though they maintained propriety in public, limiting themselves to hand-holding and the occasional touch on the arm or shoulder. In private, on the boarding house porch during quiet evenings, Daniel would sometimes draw Amanda close, his kiss gentle but filled with promise. Each time left her breathless, wondering at how different it felt from Robert's perfunctory affection. "I should check on the ranch," Daniel said one evening as they sat watching the sunset. "Been away nearly 2 months now." Amanda's heart sank. "When will you go?" "Soon. Jim's a good foreman, but winter's coming." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Come with me." "To your ranch?" she asked, surprised by the suddenness of the invitation. "Just to visit," he assured her. "Martha can spare you for a week or two, and I want you to see it before the snow comes." The prospect both excited and terrified her. "Would it be proper?" Daniel smiled. "We'll take Mrs. Whitley as chaperone. She's been wanting to visit her son's family near my place anyway." Amanda laughed at his ready solution. "You've thought this through." "I've had plenty of time to think these past weeks." His expression grew serious. "I know what I want, Amanda. I want you in my life. But I want you to be sure." She studied his face in the fading light, the strong lines softened by tenderness, the eyes that had seen so much hardship yet still held warmth. "I am sure of how I feel," she said carefully, "but I rushed into marriage once before. I'd like to be more careful this time." "Fair enough," he agreed. "So come see the ranch, see if you can picture yourself there. No pressure, no promises yet." 2 weeks later, Amanda found herself riding beside Daniel in a borrowed wagon, Mrs. Whitley chatting amiably from the back seat. The journey would take 2 days, with an overnight stop at a way station. Daniel was still not strong enough to ride chance for such a distance, so the stallion was tethered behind the wagon. The landscape changed as they traveled northwest, the flat desert giving way to rolling grasslands dotted with juniper and pine. By late afternoon of the second day, Daniel pointed toward a distant mesa. "That's the northern boundary of my land," he said, a note of pride in his voice. "Hayes Ranch starts here and runs about 4 miles that way toward the creek." As they crested a small rise, the ranch house came into view, a solidly built 2-story structure of wood and stone, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn. Smoke rose from the chimney, and a man emerged from the barn, waving as he spotted the wagon. "Jim's kept things running," Daniel said with satisfaction. "Looks like they're ready for winter." The ranch hand greeted them warmly, helping Mrs. Whitley down from the wagon while Daniel assisted Amanda. "Got everything ready like you asked in your letter, boss. Mrs. Whitley, your son's coming for you tomorrow. Said to tell you the grandkids are excited for your visit." The interior of the ranch house surprised Amanda. While not fancy, it was comfortable and well-appointed, with sturdy furniture, colorful Navajo rugs, and bookshelves filled with volumes ranging from practical ranching guides to poetry and novels. "My mother was a school teacher," Daniel explained, noting her interest in the books. "Reading was important in our house." The kitchen was spacious with a large hearth, the parlor cozy with a stone fireplace, and upstairs were 4 bedrooms. Daniel showed her to one with a beautiful handmade quilt on the bed and a window overlooking the distant mountains. "This will be your room," he said. "Mrs. Whitley is across the hall. Mine's at the end." That evening, after Jim's wife Sarah served a hearty meal of beef stew and fresh bread, they gathered in the parlor. Mrs. Whitley worked on her knitting while Daniel showed Amanda some of his favorite books. The domesticity of the scene wasn't lost on Amanda. This could be her life. These evening hours filled with quiet companionship and shared interests. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. After breakfast, Daniel took Amanda on a tour of the ranch while they waited for Mrs. Whitley's son to arrive. They rode double on Chance, Daniel's arms around Amanda as he pointed out features of his property: the creek that provided year-round water, the sheltered valley where the cattle wintered, the stand of pines he was saving for eventual expansion of the house. "It's beautiful," Amanda said sincerely as they stopped on a ridge overlooking the property. "You've built something wonderful here." "It's still growing," he replied. "Each year gets a little better." She leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I can see why you love it. Can you see yourself here?" he asked quietly, the question she knew had been on his mind. Amanda considered carefully before answering. The ranch was remote, far from the relative civilization of Promise Creek. Winters would be harsh, the work never ending. Yet there was a peace here she hadn't found elsewhere, a sense of possibility and permanence combined. "Yes," she said finally, "I can." His arms tightened around her. "I'm not asking you to decide now. Take the week. See what ranch life is really like." The days that followed gave Amanda a true taste of that life. With Mrs. Whitley happily installed at her son's nearby homestead, Amanda helped Sarah with household tasks, learning the rhythm of ranch work. She gathered eggs from the chickens, helped preserve the last of the garden's harvest, and even tried her hand at bread baking in the large kitchen hearth. Daniel, though still not at full strength, insisted on showing her every aspect of the operation. They rode out to check on the cattle, visited the small line cabin where one of the hands stayed during calving season, and spent an afternoon fishing in the creek that provided water for the ranch. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch watching the spectacular sunsets paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sometimes they talked of the future. Sometimes they simply enjoyed the comfortable silence between them. On their final evening before returning to Promise Creek, Daniel built a fire in the parlor hearth against the autumn chill. They sat side by side on the sofa, watching the flames dance. "What are you thinking?" he asked, noting her thoughtful expression. Amanda smiled. "That I never expected to find this kind of peace again. After Robert died, after everything fell apart, I thought I was simply surviving. And now I'm thinking about living again, building something." She turned to face him. "With you, if the offer still stands." Daniel took her hand, his expression solemn. "Amanda Vance, I've known some fine women in my time, but none with your courage and grace. I'd be honored to build a life with you. Even though I'm still learning how to be a proper rancher's wife," he chuckled. "We'll learn together." "That's the point, isn't it?" She nodded, her heart full. "Yes, I suppose it is." "I'm not asking for an immediate answer," he said. "Come back to Promise Creek. Finish out your commitment to Martha for the winter. Come spring if you still feel the same way. And if I already know my answer." She challenged gently, his eyes darkened with emotion. "Then I'd say we could be married by Christmas if that's not too soon for a proper Eastern lady." "Christmas sounds perfect," she whispered, leaning in as he gathered her into his arms. Their return to Promise Creek caused quite a stir. Mrs. Whitley, it seemed, had wasted no time sharing news of their blossoming relationship with her friends via the mail coach that ran between her son's settlement and the town. Martha greeted them with knowing eyes. "I take it the ranch met with your approval?" she asked Amanda privately as they unpacked. "It did," Amanda admitted. "As did its owner." Martha squeezed her hand. "I couldn't be happier for you, my dear. Daniel Hayes is a good man." "We're thinking of a Christmas wedding," Amanda said, still scarcely believing it herself. "If that's not too soon." "Plenty of time to prepare," Martha assured her, "and you'll stay on until then, if you'll have me. There's much to learn before I become a rancher's wife." The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Daniel divided his time between the ranch and Promise Creek, riding in for weekends and sometimes mid-week when ranch work allowed. On Sundays, they would attend church together, their courtship now official and the subject of much approving gossip among the townspeople. Amanda threw herself into preparations for their future together. She ordered fabric for curtains and quilts from the general store, carefully put aside a portion of her small earnings for household necessities, and even convinced the town's seamstress to help her create a simple but elegant wedding dress. As December arrived, bringing cold winds and occasional snow flurries, the date was set Christmas Eve, with Reverend Simmons officiating and a celebration afterward at the boarding house. Martha insisted on handling the arrangements, declaring it would be her wedding gift to them. "It's not much compared to what you might have had in Philadelphia," she told Amanda as they discussed the plans, "but it will be filled with people who truly care for you both." "It's perfect," Amanda assured her. "Better than anything I could have imagined a year ago." 2 days before the wedding, a heavy snowstorm descended on Promise Creek. Amanda stood at the window of her room, watching the white flakes swirl against the darkening sky, worry gnawing at her heart. Daniel had returned to the ranch 5 days earlier to complete some final preparations to the house and was due back tomorrow. "He'll be fine," Martha assured her, noting her concern. "Daniel Hayes knows this country better than most. If the weather's too bad, he'll wait it out." But when morning came with no sign of the storm abating, Amanda's worry deepened. By noon, with snow still falling heavily, Sheriff Donovan stopped by the boarding house with troubling news. "Trail to Hayes Ranch is likely impassable," he said, stomping snow from his boots in the entryway. "Sent word to anyone planning to travel to stay put until it clears." "But the wedding," Amanda said, her voice catching. "It's tomorrow evening." The sheriff's expression was sympathetic. "Weather like this, madam, plans have to change. Nature has its own schedule out here." By evening, with the storm finally showing signs of weakening, Amanda had resigned herself to postponing the wedding. She sat in the parlor with Martha, making lists of people to notify when the front door burst open, admitting a blast of cold air and a figure so covered in snow he was barely recognizable. "Daniel!" Amanda gasped, leaping to her feet. He stomped snow from his boots and unwrapped the scarf from his face, revealing wind-burned cheeks and exhausted but triumphant eyes. "Told you I'd be here." She rushed to him, heedless of the melting snow. "You're insane. You could have frozen to death." "Wasn't going to miss my own wedding," he replied, his cold lips brushing her forehead. "Besides, I brought something I didn't want to leave behind." From inside his coat, he withdrew a small velvet box, obviously old but well cared for. "This was my mother's," he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold band set with a small diamond. "I thought, for tomorrow, if you'd like it." Tears filled Amanda's eyes. "It's beautiful, but you risked your life for the woman I love," he finished simply. "Seemed worth it." His words, spoken so plainly in front of Martha and two boarders who had wandered in to see the commotion, silenced her protests. It was the first time he had declared his love so openly, though she had felt it in 100 different ways over the past months. "I love you too," she whispered. "But please don't ever scare me like that again." He grinned, some of the old recklessness showing through his exhaustion. "Yes, madam." The wedding took place as planned on Christmas Eve. The small church was decorated with pine boughs and red berries, candles casting a warm glow over the gathered townspeople. Amanda wore her cream-colored dress, a sprig of holly in her upswept hair, Martha's cameo at her throat. Daniel waited at the altar in his best suit, freshly shaved, his eyes never leaving her as she walked toward him on Sheriff Donovan's arm, the older man having offered to give her away in the absence of family. Their vows were simple and heartfelt. When Daniel slipped his mother's ring onto Amanda's finger, his hands were steady, his voice clear as he promised to love and cherish her all the days of their lives. Amanda's own voice trembled slightly as she made the same promises, still amazed at the journey that had brought her to this moment. The celebration afterward filled the boarding house with laughter and music. Someone brought a fiddle, another a harmonica, and the parlor furniture was pushed back for dancing. Daniel held Amanda close as they moved to the music, oblivious to the smiling faces around them. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, Martha's gift to them, and set out for the ranch 2 days later when the trails were fully cleared. The journey was cold but beautiful, the landscape transformed by snow into a pristine wonderland. When they crested the final rise and the ranch came into view, Daniel stopped the wagon. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hayes." Amanda looked at the sturdy house with smoke rising from the chimney, at the snow-covered fields stretching toward distant mountains, and finally at the man beside her, her husband, her partner, her future. "I never thought I'd find home again," she said softly, "but here it is." Daniel's arm tightened around her waist. "Remember what I told you that first day on the trail?" She nodded, the memory vivid despite all that had happened since. "When you can't keep going, lean till you can." "I meant it then," he said, his voice deep with emotion, "and I mean it now. We'll lean on each other, Amanda. That's how we'll build our life together." As they continued down the slope toward the ranch house, toward their future, Amanda knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just a home, but a love strong enough to weather whatever challenges lay ahead. From the moment she had collapsed on that dusty trail to this snowy homecoming, the journey had transformed her, just as Daniel's steady presence had healed wounds she'd thought would never mend. Spring arrived at Hayes Ranch with an explosion of wildflowers and new life. The winter had been harsh but beautiful, the newlyweds finding joy in simple pleasures, evenings by the fire reading aloud to each other, Amanda learning to cook on the large hearth, Daniel teaching her to ride properly so she could accompany him on his daily rounds. They had established routines that honored both their pasts while building something new together. Daniel respected Amanda's need for order and beauty, making space for the small touches she added to their home. Amanda embraced the practical necessities of ranch life, learning to prioritize what truly mattered in this environment so different from her Eastern upbringing. On a warm May morning, as they sat on the porch watching the sun rise over their land, Amanda took Daniel's hand and placed it gently over her stomach. "I have something to tell you," she said, her eyes shining with happiness. His expression changed from confusion to wonder as understanding dawned. "Really? Are you certain?" She nodded. "Dr. Wilson confirmed it when we were in Promise Creek last week. By Christmas, there will be 3 of us." Daniel whooped with joy, lifting her from her chair and spinning her around, his face alight with happiness. "A baby, our baby," Amanda laughed, clinging to his shoulders. "Yes, our baby, a new chapter in our story." He set her down carefully, suddenly concerned. "Should you be up on a horse?" "Maybe we should move back to town until after Daniel Hayes," she interrupted firmly. "I am having a baby, not turning into glass. Women have babies on ranches every day. I'll be careful, but this is our home. This is where our child belongs." He studied her face, seeing the determination there, and nodded slowly. "You're right, but promise you'll tell me when you need to rest. When you can't keep going, I'll lean on you till I can," she finished, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "I promise." As the golden morning light spread across their land, highlighting new growth and possibility, Amanda thought of the journey that had brought her here from desperate widow to beloved wife, and soon-to-be mother. The trail had been difficult, sometimes seemingly impossible to navigate, but she had found the strength to continue, often by leaning on the steadfast man beside her. And in that leaning, in that vulnerability and trust, she had found not weakness but a different kind of strength, the strength that comes from loving and being loved, from building a future together one day at a time.